Hi everybody and welcome to another Kalicube Tuesdays with Wordlift. We do this once a month and it's geeky time for us all, but today it's not so geeky. It's very pragmatic and practical because we're looking at accessibility and the advantages it can bring to SEO, because we tend to look at accessibility as a problem, but in fact it's a huge solution. Welcome Kim, welcome Tina. How are you both today?
No, we are fine. It's a fine afternoon in Rome, 32 degrees Celsius, so we can't complain.
It's pretty excellent in Sofia as well. Thank you, Jason. Excited to be here today.
Brilliant.
Okay.
I'm afraid I just got a little bit of confusion because I had the window open on YouTube, so I was hearing you both before and after, and I was wondering where it was coming from. So that's my unprofessionalism suddenly hitting in after almost 300 episodes of this podcast. I'm going to sing you the song because it makes me feel relaxed. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Tina and Kim. Brilliant. Now, I'm really pleased to be here because when the topic was suggested to me, I thought, oh dear, this isn't very interesting. But in fact, it is very interesting. And I'm hugely interested to hear not only the technical aspects, which are supposedly boring, but actually quite interesting because legally speaking, we have an obligation to provide accessible websites. Kim, you're going to speak about that, but there are also huge opportunities that we haven't thought about, and especially with accessibility being incredibly powerful for a search engine, a robot that is blind. So, Kim, you're going to start out by explaining why this is important from a legal standpoint and what legal points we need to look at. But we've lost Kim, so we're not going to be talking about that immediately until we've talked to Tina about the... no, you're back now, Kim.
I'm back, thank you.
So you're going to speak about the legal aspects, which I find hugely interesting because we haven't yet addressed them at Kalicube, and I really want to know what we need to do, what dangers we're running, and how we can do it.
Okay, but you're not running any dangers, of course, because it's all we're talking all about opportunities, right? But even then, there are.
Oh, we're struggling with Kim's connection here. Tina, can you fill in on that? We're not running any dangers. We're only looking at opportunities.
What I will go through really fast today.
I think Kim, you're going to have to stop sharing your screen. I think there's a problem with sharing the screen. Is that we've got too much bandwidth.
That must have. Interesting.
Tina, could you share with me the opportunities that we're seeing here? Kim very rightly said it's not a danger, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. Can you give us an overview of that?
Yeah, I think what Kim was going off of is the new European legislation around accessibility that just provides a very large opportunity for the brands in the European market to create products, website products that are a lot more accessible and inclusive. And the reason why this is not a danger yet is because there is a grace period. We are currently in the grace period during which brands have the opportunity to address whatever accessibility cheese holes there might be in their websites, and it isn't until I think April of 2025 for sure, but I'm blanking on the exact month when the legislation is going to start getting enforced.
Right. So I've basically got 2 years where I can take it easy. And then with GA4, Google Analytics 4, it suddenly puts up these messages saying you've only got 10 days left. Then you freak out. So this is something we should start looking at now, because in 2 years' time, we're going to be freaking out and it will probably be too late.
Exactly. And some of those fixes are not, we'll talk about them in a little bit, but really some of them, depending on how large your website is, what kind of organization you are, what the decision-making processes are, and so on and so forth, it can really take months to years to get some of those website changes approved and applied. So it is excellent time, in my opinion, to be talking about accessibility right now.
Well, I have 2 questions then. We're a small company, relatively simple, because the decision process is pretty short. So we can probably wait a year or 2, or a year and a half, not a year or 2, because in 2 years we're in trouble.
Yeah, honestly, I've been doing a lot of this work already because I work a lot with the US market, and the US market, they have the American with Disabilities Act since the 90s. And what we've been seeing is that really a lot of the accessibility improvements that are also in the European legislation are really, the bottom line is user-friendly, improvement of the usability of the website. And as we know from the last couple of years, the search engine algorithm updates are really, really prioritizing usability, users' experience on the website.
Yeah, no, and search engines are definitely looking for the best possible user experience, because they're recommending your site to their users and saying this is a great destination. And when people come to the site and can't use the site, that's obviously a huge problem for them, and they don't want to recommend you. And they've been pushing the SEO community to improve, but that's just financial or traffic wise. Legally speaking, in America, we should already be compliant. Is that correct?
There are, in the US, I don't believe your company falls under the 2 titles that are required by law to be ADA compliant. Generally speaking, everyone should be, because it's best. It's like a best practice. However, you're not a governmental institution, which is Title II, I believe. And the Title III, you're not an e-commerce website, a hotel, hospital, bank, retail shop, or theater/sport event. You don't provide any of those services. So those are the 2 main titles/fields within the US legislation.
So in the US, is an e-commerce, hotel, sports event, government
they're
institution?
divided into titles, and titles 2 and 3 are the ones that are most important. And it's a matter of, just legally being aware of where your business category falls under. And that's really the determinative. For example, back in 18, 19, I had a really large e-commerce client in the US who's one of their top competitors filed an accessibility lawsuit against them because they didn't have image alt text.
Right. So anything, even as small as image alt text, can create a huge problem and create a lawsuit if you're in the wrong category in the US. And in 2 years' time in Europe, that category is going to be much wider. And everybody will be in a situation where even an alt text missing is likely to cause a problem. One of the questions I had is, I use WordPress, and I kind of think, oh, WordPress will sort all this out for me, so I don't need to worry about it. Is that a fair way of looking at it? Saying, well, I can just relax and let WordPress take care?
Not quite. I wouldn't say, because there are a lot of choices you can make along the way, regardless of your CMS. For example, your theme. For example, if your
Right.
theme is too bright, too dim, too dark, and there are certain themes, WordPress themes, that are too dark because it's an
Right.
aesthetic. This is not compliant. You also get to choose your fonts, the sizes, the contrast. I put together a couple different checklists that we can go over.
On the slides, here we go.
In the slides. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, because I look at themes, and as soon as you install a theme, all of a sudden it becomes about being pretty.
Yeah.
And being pretty is not necessarily compliant.
But it's not quite like that. Exactly. So a couple of things I have prepared. We already talked about a couple, we touched on accessibility in the US, that it's been a thing for a hot minute now. And there's already been a bunch of lawsuits. I already mentioned about my client. Beyonce's website got sued in 2020, and she paid a hefty fine. Domino's, the pizzas, they also had an issue like that a couple years back. But when it comes to SEO and website accessibility, there are four main principles.
Sorry, before the four main principles, can you go back 2 slides? I've got a question.
Yeah.
313 million internet users, 274 million internet users on mobile in the United States. That's huge. And most of us don't pay attention to our websites on mobile because we're working on it on desktop. So how can we change that point of view? How can we get people to look at mobile first, which is what Google have been asking us to do for years?
Responsive design.
Right, brilliant. And and that's the point, is trying to get somebody to design a website on mobile first and then adapt it to desktop is hugely difficult.
It is, and I see it every day. You very rightfully so pointed out that even as SEOs, I do my work from my computer, not from my phone.
Yeah.
So in specific projects where we're doing website redesigns, when we're QAing and working with developers, I always oftentimes actually have to remind my team to be looking at both the mobile and the desktop version when we review the designs.
Okay, brilliant. And I kind of think that's step number 1, is think about mobile, which is accessibility for a huge market who have no accessibility issues as the laws would state. Then move on to desktop and sort out the accessibility issues for both of them. And if you move forward to your 2 screens to the 4 points you were going to make, I will stop interrupting for a couple of minutes.
And to circle back to your earlier point, when you asked, can we wait 2 more years if you're, a European company? Can we wait 2 more years to start implementing some of those recommendations? This is just another example of why it's best to start working on this right now, because accessibility and the mobile aspect that we're talking about, this is huge for user experience, for SEO, for so many different aspects of the engagement you're going to get with your website. And it's also an accessibility factor. So
right. Yeah. And I think the huge point to make here is most of us haven't even thought about mobile yet. And you're suddenly asking me to think about accessibility for all sorts of users. And we talked about the different types of users. It's users with hearing issues, sight issues, color blindness, digital.
It's visual impairment, which includes total blindness, tunnel vision, central loss vision, low vision, and color blindness. Wow. I have a couple of slides on color blindness specifically because it's very common, actually. Yep. Hearing impairment, deafness, and hard hearing. Physical impairments such as differently abled people may need to use different devices to type.
Right.
And cognitive impairments, people who have seizures and other forms of cognitive disabilities. So there are different types of disability.
Right. And that's huge, and it's something I don't think most people think about. We don't think about the variety of issues people can have with interacting with a website, and the vast number of people who have this kind of issue, however extreme or relatively small it might be. And I can't remember why I heard it, but it's something like, was it 15 or 20% of the population have some kind of disability when dealing with websites?
Where did you?
I can't remember. I might be totally made up, but if we just say more than 10%,
I think that's a fair number. I personally haven't seen a statistic like that, but it sounds about right.
Right. Yeah. So
especially when the way we define the different
yes,
these different aspects, and bear in mind that color blindness, which is something that you can't see, you don't know if I'm colorblind or not,
no.
So my
color blindness is incredibly common, and it is a disability. And you were talking about themes that don't have sufficient contrast between the two colors, or that use colors that are typically problematic for people who are colorblind. My father-in-law is colorblind and made a career as an artist in black and white. That was his solution, and it was absolutely brilliant. He's a delightful chap.
That is amazing.
So go ahead with the 4 principles of accessibility.
Yes. So the 4 principles of accessibility, you can see also on the right-hand side this handy graphic that your website and its content should be perceivable. So all information should be presented in a way that is accessible for users. It should be operable, so the users are able to interact and navigate with the different components on the website. Understandable. The user interface should be intuitive and robust. I personally also think about this as website speed to like simplify it a little bit, but robust. And what this means really in practice is that we want to be using the right technologies to power our website to be the best, to give just the best experience possible. And these 4 pillars, I've linked here to the full guidelines, and they're new. This is the 2.1 version, and this stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. There is a 2.2 version that is in draft, and it would be officially published very, very soon. I think it was in July or end of June or July. So it's an excellent resource, really, for the more for people who want to get more technically savvy after we go through the next couple of slides, and they want to get a better, it's excellent documentation for your tech team, essentially.
Absolutely brilliant. Welcome back, Kim. And just to come back to the screen before, one thing that strikes me is I broke our website, the Kalicube Pro platform, and my entire team had to work using tab and return because the mouse didn't work. And they managed to do it, but they spent 10 times longer doing any task because they had to tab through all of the different elements and then hit return rather than use the mouse. And it struck me that was a very good lesson for me.
How long did it take you to fix it?
About 5 seconds. So yeah, and that is the ridiculous side of it, is they wasted literally days of work and it took me 5 seconds to fix.
Good lesson.
It is a great lesson. Sorry, Kim, you're back. How's your internet connection now? The internet connection is fine, but we can't hear you. You must be muted.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next
Now you
slide.
can hear. Now you
Yes,
can
we
hear
can.
me. Yeah. So I don't know how much you got into the presentation. So, but I see Tina started, and that's good. That's great.
Yeah, so I mean, what we could actually do, Kim, is can you explain the legal side of it? We had a quick look at the American law, which has already been in place for a long time, applying to sections or sectors 2 and 3. The European law that will come into force in 2 years' time. We have a grace period for 2 years, but the European law is going to be more extensive. Can you run us through really quickly what the 2 different laws are?
Yeah,
and what the
I mean, also without the presentation. So yes, the EU have taken their initiative, and that means that the member states from 1 year from now must implement this EU law in national, and that is what will happen for the next.
Okay, well, Kim, we're losing you again. But what I understood there is Kim said 1 year from now. So is it 2024 or 2025? If somebody can answer in the chat, that would be really cool. And we're going to come back to the presentation. Tina. We don't have your sound. The most common SEO errors in accessibility.
Well, to your question about 2024 versus 2025, it is the European Accessibility Act 2025. There is this excellent blog post on the Wordlift blog. I'm looking at it right now, and it is the general overview of accessibility and the European Accessibility Act of 2025. Maybe there are some nuances or certain 2024 nuances in the implementation that I'm not fully up to speed with.
Right. I mean, I think that comes back to whether it's 2024 or 2025, we need to get moving, and we can't rely on WordPress to solve the problem for us. And we have the most common accessibility SEO errors in front of us. And this is, once again, the opportunities. It's saying we can solve these accessibility issues, become compliant, and solve some SEO issues at the same time. How would you do that?
It's good to learn from some of the common accessibility errors that are also SEO errors that we've been seeing in other markets that already have such guidelines. So on the right hand side, you can see a little graph of some of the most common errors, and on the left hand side with the bullet points, I included what I've personally seen most common with the clients I've been working with. So lack of image alt text, I already mentioned that I got a client who almost got a lawsuit for lack of that. You get a grace period, at least in the US, when you get notified. Basically, you have a grace period of, I don't remember how many days, during which you can
solve the issue.
Improve the accessibility. Then some issues with accessing drop-down menus. These are huge. They're also very impactful for SEO. Your rankings normally would just drop dramatically if you have issues with top navigation. Contrast errors, we briefly mentioned those. They're also huge, and lack of headers. So the hierarchy of a page, that is another very common issue.
Right, all of which are huge SEO questions, and the alt text was something we traditionally spammed and added lots of keywords to, and it should actually describe the image. And if you spam with keywords, you imagine the person using a screen reader who just hears red shoes, red shoes, red shoes, red shoes, red shoes,
Yeah.
red shoes, when it should be saying woman wearing red shoes from
Exactly.
Gucci, for example.
Exactly.
Hugely annoying.
I outlined this a little SEO and accessibility checklist. These are some of the rather the most common SEO and accessibility aspects that people should be aware of. Is the responsive design. We already talked about that and the importance of mobile first. Consistent navigation. I've gotten a lot of questions over the years, like SEO wise, not even people thinking about accessibility, but is it okay for my website to have different navigation on mobile versus desktop? No. No. Your anchor text is also very important because a lot of softwares that people with different disabilities use read out and use that as a guideline. So linking to here or click, those avoid them.
Right, and that's one thing with anchor text is I find it very difficult linking on a sentence or a set of words that make sense, because I want to write, if you want to know more, click here or read more here.
I guess it depends on the prompt, because if you're using the anchor as a CTA of some sort, then click here is fine. But
Right.
if you're writing a blog post and you're just wanna, in the previous sentence you mentioned for example, you want to link to a recipe about lemon cake, and instead of using lemon cake as your anchor text, next to lemon cake in parentheses you put click here. You don't need click here. You can just use lemon cake.
Right. Yeah. So it's be pragmatic and think about what somebody is listening to or using as a screen reader or an assistant. And also tabbing is something I find hugely difficult because there's a tab order. And as a coder, I get very lazy and I think, well, I don't really care about that. But in fact, the tab order is hugely important.
Yeah. So the HTML attributes, we mentioned image, alt text, title attributes, but the area label is also very important.
I don't know what that is. Can you tell me what it is?
Yeah, the area label is also tied to the design aspect. Essentially, it's like image alt text, but it can be used to provide more info to visually impaired people. And when I said it's tied to the design aspect, I just meant that it's more extensive than just the alt text. So also using videos is super, super big when it comes to content, and it's great. People love videos. They consume videos. They help with conversions. You should have videos on your website. You should also have video captions and transcriptions to those videos to make sure they are accessible. Any SEO is gonna tell you about the importance of headers on your web page, H1 through H6. Accessibility checkers love them too. In this bottom.
Oh, I found a good thing for headers is I add table of contents in WordPress.
Yes.
And as soon as I add that, I immediately see what rubbish headers I've used. The headings just don't make sense.
Exactly.
They're not well nested, and they don't help me skim read.
This is an excellent point. Excellent point. And I have the table of contents and summary further down. So
I'd love to say I hadn't seen it.
No, you're taking the words right out of my mouth. So,
In fact, I hadn't seen it, but we added a table of contents to our website, and it's completely changed engagement on the website.
no, I love table of contents as both a user and a content marketer. I love it. I wish I loved it even before it became a thing, but very few brands were using it. Structured data is also huge. On the right hand side here on the top, you can see the circled in orange example of a breadcrumb structured data. That's just one of many different types, but breadcrumb is excellent for accessibility as well. Meta tags, your href tag, title, meta description, the viewport, all of those are ones you need to pay close attention to clarify on the viewport. That helps for your content to be properly displayed on different devices and screens of different sizes. So you definitely want to pay attention to it. We talked about the table of content. FAQs have been a super hot topic in the SEO world for a while now. So no surprises here. I think if you take a look at this checklist, it's SEO and accessibility. But as SEOs, we've seen all of these points, I think, really come up a lot over the last couple of years. And on the next slide, I have a couple.
Sorry, hugely important for SEO, now hugely important for accessibility. Kim, what are your thoughts on this now that we've got you back?
I hope if I dare speaking, because the connection is cutting off when I open my mouth. Yeah. Okay. I think this list is of course very, very important. I would say all bullets are important. Yes, it is something we see more and more websites and e-commerces are focused on these elements. From our experience, of course, structured data are crucial. Also FAQs, I would say. But then the rest of it, I would say, is it should be on the checklist of every SEO manager, but actually also who's designing a website or landing page, whatever.
It should already have been there. Yeah, 100%. Now, I've just got a question that I have a curiosity. FAQs, how does that come into accessibility?
I think FAQs respond very well to search intent. If we start from the customer journey from the search engine. Right. So it is, as I see it, a way to extend the content of your website into the SERP of a search engine, for instance, Google. We actually I know situations where some properties do not like FAQs because it's like some of their content is exposed not on their own property but in the SERP of the search engine, right? But actually, it is as I see it a very strong tool both for SEO and accessibility in this, and it's a strong tool because you have opportunity to show right away, very fast, what everything is about.
Right. Oh, that brings me to another question. How accessible is Google? How accessible are Google SERPs? I've just been looking while you were talking at alt tags, and some of the images have them and some of them don't. Google doesn't seem incredibly accessible to me, but I might be wrong. Does anybody know anything about that, or is it just me being curious about something I shouldn't be looking at?
No, I actually thought about it preparing for tonight.
Oh, okay, brilliant.
But then I just skipped it in the sense that I never saw any studies. I never think about it actually. I mean, they are.
Well, it has area hidden equals true, and I've got no idea what that means.
Yeah, and they got a standardized design, right?
Right.
I mean, you know where to find things, and I think that is already a good step ahead. But how they respond to
Right.
to standards, I never investigated.
But that does bring the huge point of having a standardized design, which you were talking about earlier on, Tina, is not having a design that changes from page to page and navigation that changes from a page to page. Sorry, Tina, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I was gonna say that I almost wonder. It hasn't really crossed my mind to think about Google, because I guess I always thought it as a given that they might have like some sort of a special application or people using specific types of software. The software would be adapted to Google, or Google would adapt for that. But it's an excellent question. I'll actually look into it afterwards.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry for throwing that question out. It just suddenly occurred to me when Kim was talking about FAQs and getting visibility in the SERP, is to what extent a Google...
No, but it is interesting. It is interesting because, I mean, as a property, we have to think about and try to cover the customer journey from as an early point as possible, right? And that often means the search engine. So I think the question is highly relevant, even we are not able to respond in a satisfying way today.
Well, a really quick point that I've just looked at is with images, if there's an alt text on the site, it appears that Google will repeat it. And when it's storing the data, the image within the page itself as, what's it called when they do all those...
the carousels.
Yeah, it doesn't respect it, but that's a completely different question. When it comes from Google, it seems they're not respecting alt text, and when it comes from another website, they are. Anyway, Tina, sorry, I've interrupted. Please do carry on. I will now stop with my stream of consciousness about Google.
Thank you, Jason. I have a continuation to the SEO and accessibility checklist that's arbitrarily separated into non-SEO, and that's because it's not, I don't personally consider this, and this is, as I said, arbitrary, but the following points are still very important for accessibility, but I think SEOs may or may not traditionally examine these aspects. I still think it's important to talk about them. First, the keyboard website navigation, in addition to standard mouse navigation. This is for people who use specific devices to browse your website, devices that cannot allow for a trackpad or a mouse. This one, I thought was particularly interesting. Also, accessible online forums. This can be part of your conversion rate optimization check, but depends I guess. On the right hand side at the top, I took a screenshot, and there's an image of a poor online form where you have the labels inside the fields. So all the labels should be outside of the field. So when people start typing, or if they use voice to type, they can still read the prompt of what is asked. There are also clear instructions on how to fill out the form, and very clear error indicators. Error indicators should both include color and text if any of the fields were not properly filled out. There's also semantic tags, HTML. This is the HTML5. This is the bottom photo you can see for like graphic of the overall structure of your HTML is important. So this is more for your dev folks. And then we go to CSS, font formatting, contrast. There's have a lot of things you can talk about contrast. We'll dive into that in the next couple slides. Website theme, we already touched upon that. And less animations and no flashing lights, because
So I just wanted to show this, because I used to work in the car leasing space in the UK, and this is the world's least enjoyable website, and it has everything wrong with it you've just described, with the flashing lights, the colors that don't make sense, very difficult to read. And I didn't actually mean to share it right off the bat, so I apologize once again.
Yeah, and the reason why we want less animations and no flashing lights is because they are a huge trigger for people with epilepsy.
Right.
So
in fact, this website used to rank incredibly well, and it now no longer ranks at all. This was 10 years ago. They were the huge competition for the client that I had, and they were a huge thorn in the side, and they got a lot of visibility through the number of links that people sent to it, because it was such a scary website. And now those links are doing them no favors, and they're now ranking much, much, much lower, because Google's got smarter and has realized, I think, that people don't necessarily want that kind of experience. And it's certainly accessibility-wise a complete disaster. Please do carry on, Tina.
thank you. That was very good before and after example, I think. A lot of the questions I've gotten over the last couple of years have to do with contrast. What do we do? What do we not do when it comes to contrast? And just that bit by itself, we can talk about it so much. And it's a fine line, I think, between the SEO work and the designer work and the UX, UI professionals. So I think for SEOs, they should be aware of that this is a factor. They should definitely use a contrast checker if they're part of the QA process. And please do try and get yourself part of the QA process for any new website designs that might be happening on your website. The communication aspect of this, claiming your seat at the table as an SEO, this is first and foremost. It's my last bullet, but it should be my first bullet. So use a contrast checker. There are certain fonts, font guidelines that you can see here. I won't go into every single one of them, because I'm sure our listeners can read off the screen. But using dark text on light background and light text on dark background, the sufficient contrast that you can see in this in the example on the right hand side is a good one. Then, generally speaking, if you have an overlay of content, of copy over an image, do consider the contrast on that as well. And the do nots, This is a list of color combos to avoid. And on the right-hand side, this is how we can test if any one of us or our listeners are colorblind, because a colorblind person cannot see any of the images. There is a K, a 10, and a horse or some sort of an animal, and colorblind people cannot see those.
Right. Well, I'm struggling with the K and the 10 until you pointed it out, and the horse was fine.
Yeah. So nuances do matter a lot. And here's another good example of background combos that vary from good to poor. So yeah, lots of the general takeaway is, as you saw in the bullet, dark background, light background, darker font.
Right.
A contrast checker can really help you with this. You don't need to know, as an SEO, you don't need to know like all the little details of how it's calculated. I mean, you can read about it in the tools and resources section. I've provided some of the documentation, so you definitely can read about it. But to get you started, using some of those checkers, using some of those high-level guidelines is going to be more than enough.
Absolutely brilliant. Wow. Oh, that was more information than I possibly imagined. Thank you very much. So what we were going to do was start with the legal aspect. Now, Kim, you're back. Now we can look at the legal
I'm
aspect.
back. I hope I'm back, because I see I still got some problems, but let's try. So just speaking, I don't know where I was cut off.
It seems that every time Kim speaks, somebody in the internet universe just presses a button and turns him off, because apparently somebody in the hemisphere of the internet doesn't want to know about the legal aspects of accessibility. So we're going to come back to the practical aspects of accessibility with Tina. I found that hugely interesting with the colors and the fact that I thought I had perfect eyesight, but I don't. I still struggle to see the K on the blue, and you're muted, Tina.
Yes, the K was most challenging for me too, actually. I did see it, but it was less clear than any of the other ones. So this color exercise that we just did really points to the fact that any action, any information we want to convey to users, we should do so with both text and color. Color by itself does not suffice to convey any sort of message to a user on the internet. I think that's the main takeaway.
Right. Okay. And then we also
have... I'm so sorry. This connection is, I don't know what is happening today.
It's okay. Let's give it one more try for the legal stuff.
Okay. I will
really
try
quickly.
Again.
Speak as quickly as
Very quickly. So from the legal stuff, now we got this EU initiative, and they have given the nation states in 1 year, each state should elaborate its own set of rules in these areas. So that means that what the EU has done is making like a frame law with some minimum standards that each member state should respond to. So that means that we will get in the private sector, we will get kind of minimum laws on a European level, but still companies should interest themselves of national laws, because there could be minor differences.
I have a question, Kim.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If I can interrupt, Jason.
do.
But you said that companies have 1 year, but I was reading the blog post.
No, they got two years
2 years.
because
So,
actually, if we count from today, it's 3 years, right? Because the national parliament got 1 year, and then after that there will be 2 years, 2 years period.
Which explains beautifully the difference. The national governments have got a year to figure out what their specific laws will be, and we will all have as companies 2 years. And I'd better be careful in France because it might not be the same as it is in Spain.
Yes, I mean, the situation should certainly be better than it is today, because we will get more conformity than we got today. I mean, today we got like Germany and the Scandinavian countries that got very, very well-defined rules, while in other countries there's nearly no rules. And that means we have to remember, talking about private sector, that we're not talking about only European companies, but all companies selling into the EU market. So that is will save a lot of energy and resources also for companies like from the United States or other places outside the EU, that they can have a more common law frame to operate in.
Which brings another question, is if I don't sell to Europe, but people in Europe are visiting my website, but I'm based in the US, what are my risks? Because I know a lot of American companies have cut off Europeans because of GDPR.
Yes, it's very interesting because also we don't even know from each national parliament what will come out in terms of what will happen if you're not response to this laws. So it can be actually quite risky. I mean, if you are an American company, for instance, and you don't want to have these risks, let's say you got a very little, the European market is not that important to you. Maybe it would be better actually to simply cut off the having only customers from the US or other markets where you can cover the situation. I mean, on the other hand, if you got a great market share in Europe, you should of course work together with Tina in order to respect all the demands that you have to respond to.
And presumably the way to go would be to start with the laws that are the most strict, let's say Germany, for the sake of argument.
But yes, I think the way to go is to respond on the W3C standards in Europe, because we already know them from the public sector, and listening to the Europe debate in general, that is more or less what is expected that will be transported into the national laws. So if you start there, you should be very well off in a year. I mean, if you start today to work in this direction, in a year's time, you should be very well off when the national laws are coming out, and you can then better adjust.
So, I mean, basically what's now happening is the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, are the standards we should have been applying, but we were all too lazy to do. And these laws are basically bullying us to actually apply them.
Kind of. That is probably what will be happening. And then again, keep an eye on the national markets where you got a good market share, or you want to have a good market share.
Okay, and Tina, from a practical point of view, I mean, I've cheated there and looked up the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, as though I knew what I was talking about. what are the practical solutions? Because I find it incredibly confusing and difficult because their documentation is really not understandable from a lay person's perspective. Get a professional.
Before you get a professional, you could even try and get a professional, but there's some easy things you can do by yourself to get a general understanding of how compliant or not your website is right now. The last slide of my presentation, I included some tools and resources. And in there are, I believe, 2 free tools that anyone can run on their website to see what kind of accessibility errors they have. And it outlines the different types of accessibility errors. So this is going to help guide you or give you a big picture point of view before even bringing someone in as to how big of a project this is. You could also use, because the number of accessibility errors you see, and there's, you can get a little score. So in layman's terms, you can get a sense of where you are.
Right. I just ran a couple of our sites through the validator on W3.org. And WordPress gets 140 errors out of 400 points, and Kalicube Pro, which is based on Medtronic, gets 40 errors out of 117 points. So we already have work to do, and I'm going to have to get started on that. I'm wondering as well, to what extent should I take this seriously? I mean, to what extent do I need to look at every single error that W3C throws back?
I like using Wave, which is...
Oh, can you share the link?
Yes, I'm gonna drop it. 1 second. Here.
Brilliant.
I like to use Wave. You can use a web page address. They also have a pretty handy, this is the online version, but I also have the plugin on my Chrome. So when you run it through there, it color codes it into critical errors, basically red, yellow. So it helps you with the prioritization.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I'm going to use that instead because it's much less frightening. And I'm running it through now, and we're going to have to talk about this. We've got, 75 contrast errors. We're in trouble. Right. Okay. So Kalicube has a lot of work to do. Kim,
you're not the only one. Sorry?
Well, no, I'm just thinking now about time. I've got 2 years to do it. I want to start today. What priority is this going to have to be?
I think it should have priority, especially if you got a bigger organization. Small organizations are normally more flexible, but if you think about a bigger organization, there's so many stakeholders producing content, that if you have to start today just to organize yourself around this stuff, because otherwise you really risk it might be a costly affair, or because you're disorganized, or because you're not arriving on time, or whatever. I think the timing is very good, actually, because if you take 1 year, now you start to organize yourself, and then you start to work out everything in the 2 years you got. You should be able, even big organizations, complex organizations should be able to adapt.
Right. Yeah, I mean, looking at what I can see for our site, I mean, I can see immediately how we can solve it. And then it's a question of putting in place the processes to solve it.
I would say start from the low-hanging fruit from a practical point of view. Start from the low-hanging fruit that is going to give you most return on SEO as well. So it's going to hit both the SEO and accessibility checkbox. Do the headers if you have any header errors, fix those, see if you have alt text missing on any images too. Image alt text, because that's going to help you in visual search. And then definitely address the contrasting errors as well. But the contrasting errors, you need to involve more people from the team, like probably designers, developers. So that's going to take longer to implement. Whereas I feel the header info, image alt text, that's something, especially image alt text, an intern can do.
Right, no, 100%. I mean, we've got 2 skipped heading levels, 44 contrast errors, 9 errors here that I can immediately see it just needs to go through. But that means somebody sitting down and going through it case by case. In WordPress, it's on a decently built CMS, you're going to be able to solve it site-wide for a lot of stuff, but it's a huge job and we need to start organizing ourselves. Sorry, Kim. One last word from you on this whole problem.
Please remember, if you are less than 10 people in your company, you are not obligated to follow those rules. That is interesting. That small companies are excluded in Europe from these obligations. So you don't have to, but I would of course advise you to do it anyhow, to getting your market share and bring your company value.
Yeah, I think kind of that's an absolutely amazing point. Is as a small company, I don't need to do it. But Tina, you're going to tell me there's an enormous opportunity if I do it, because so many people are involved on the client side.
No, it is an opportunity, and also I think it's an opportunity that from now we will start to discuss this, and you can kind of ride the wave, right? People will be talking about it, discussing, and so on.
Brilliant.
And we've got a lot of things to learn and put it all into work and make life better for both of our own company and our customers.
Which is a lovely point. Tina, one last point from you, and then we can wrap it up.
I would say that the bottom line for me as a person is that accessibility is an act of being human.
Brilliant.
I think a lot of us take for granted the fact that we can access websites so easily without any constraints, that we don't get seizures, that, we are very lucky to be in those positions, those of us who are. So I think of it as a human act to make our websites as brands as accessible as we can for everyone else who is not as privileged as we are. SEO aside and profit aside, this is an act of humanism, I think.
That's a brilliant way to end it. Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Kim. That was informative.
You're welcome. Sorry again for being on and off.
It's okay. We dealt with it, and Tina filled in for you beautifully. We had a delightful conversation, the three of us.
Thank you, Tina.
So much useful information, so much helpful information. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next month for another Wordlift monthly roundtable with Kalicube. I'll sing you out. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Tina and Kim.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Kalicube. It's all about your brand SERP.